Hey guys, and welcome back, or if you're new here, hi, my name's Georgia, and on my platforms I focus mostly on unsolved true crime. I talk about murders, unidentified people, missing people, but occasionally I like to talk about other types of crimes and conspiracies as well, such as today. A crime that didn't end in the loss of somebody's life, but was traumatising for the victims nonetheless. Between 1984 and 1994, Bill and Dorothy Wacker, an elderly married couple from Massillon, Ohio, were the victims of harassment and home invasion by an unknown culprit. Although I do want to say that most sources describe them as an elderly couple, but when this started they were only in their late 50s, and I'm not entirely sure that comes under the elderly category, maybe middle-aged. But anyway, despite extensive investigation over the decade and the harassment happening almost every single day in that time, the case remains cold and unsolved today. This is definitely one of those cases which has kind of caught the attention of the internet more than it did the mainstream media. A lot of the information from this video was pulled from Reddit threads and other forums rather than what I'd consider to be sort of legitimate sources, so please do take all of this with a pinch of salt. What we do know is it's definitely something that happened in real life. There's a whole old school unsolved mysteries episode about this, but that's pretty much the only solid source we have. Many internet sleuths and true crime enthusiasts believe that this was a hoax orchestrated by the couple themselves, but I'll leave that up to you to decide. So our main characters here are William Louis Bill Wacker, born the 12th of March 1920, and Dorothy Jean Wacker, born April 21st, 1927. Both grew up in Massillon, Ohio, which is a city about 50 miles south of Cleveland with a population of around 30,000 people. And pretty much all we know about their backgrounds is that as a young adult, Bill had been a private in the United States Army and he served in World War II, and that is about all we know. When the harassment began in 1984, the couple had been married for 40 years, with no big dramas in all that time. Like, nothing much really happened in their lives. They were said to be very quiet, unassuming people. And then in 1984, the couple say they are victims of two separate home invasions, in the same home they'd lived in for almost their entire marriage. But they don't notify the police of either occurrence. Now maybe they just didn't want to make a fuss. I can't tell you how much was taken from their home, if anything was at all. Maybe they thought they wouldn't be taken seriously. Maybe they just didn't really care that much. They didn't report it to the police. I mean, some people just don't ever want to cause a fuss, especially of that generation. And then on January 16th, 1985, the same thing happened again and their home was completely ransacked. It was only at that point that they informed the police of all three home invasions. But not much really happened after this point. An investigation was opened but it didn't go very far, and they just tried to move on with their lives. But 6 months later, in July 1985, Dorothy is physically attacked inside their home. She was home alone whilst recovering from heart surgery when she hears a knock on the front door, finding a young white male on the doorstep claiming that his car had broken down. Could he use her phone? Now, being a good neighbour, a good Samaritan, Dorothy of course lets him in and shows him where the phone is, before walking away to give the man some privacy whilst he dealt with his issues. She would report hearing the man say his goodbyes to whoever he was speaking to, and then she assumes that he left the home and went quiet. Only then she's bludgeoned over the head from behind. She's completely knocked out. When she comes around, she finds herself bound and gagged on the kitchen floor, but she is completely alone. There's no sign of her attacker. Still bound, she crawls to the kitchen window and shouts for her neighbours, who quickly call the police and go to help her. When Bill and the police arrive at the home, Dorothy provides the following description of her attacker. She says it was a young man in his mid-20s with blonde hair and blue eyes, about 5'9" in height. A composite sketch is created from her description, which my YouTube viewers will be able to see on screen now. But honestly, it just looks like your average white man. There's nothing particularly distinguishing about this person's face. In a sweep of the house, Bill notices that a number of their things have gone missing. An antique watch, a movie camera, a radio scanner, and Bill's gun, a .22 caliber revolver. There was also a cryptic message written in crayon on the kitchen wall, reading, "Cheaper, but will do." It was very vague. Nobody really to this day has any idea what this is in reference to. But the question has always been, like, why would the attacker write this cryptic note if he knew that nobody would know what it meant, besides from just maybe messing with the Wackers and all the authorities? Like, what was the point of this? As part of their investigation, law enforcement visit a number of pawn shops in the local area looking for these stolen items and hopefully the perpetrator's details alongside them, but that search, of course, is fruitless. After this point, the harassment really steps up a notch, or maybe this is when the harassment truly starts, but I'm working under the assumption that all of the previous home invasions may have been conducted by the same person, because otherwise, just what's the chances of that? The Wackers would report receiving harassing phone calls at all hours of the day. Sometimes the caller would call and threaten extreme violence, or sometimes he'd just breathe heavily down the phone without saying a single word. Despite the couple changing their phone numbers several times over the years, the calls would just continue. Immediately upon reading this, I realised that the harasser must be somebody close to the family, somebody in their inner circle. Bill and Dorothy are changing their phone number and handing it out to only the people closest to them, suggesting that the perpetrator is one of those people, or at least potentially close to one of those people. Maybe close enough to have access to a phone or address book that would hold such details. At random hours of the night, the couple would also report hearing loud, relentless pounding on the exterior of their home, not just on the front door, but on all the outside walls. So Bill installed security lights to try and fend this person off, but it only seems to make it worse. It starts happening more and more often. And then one morning, Bill opens the front door to find a handwritten note on the porch. The first bit is something completely unintelligible, I have no idea what it says, but then it says, "Didn't do you in next time, called but didn't answer, your lights are a laugh," and lights spelt with a Z instead of an S. Over the coming months, more notes we left on the porch saying things like, "You scum, get even, this time, ha ha." To me, it looks like the notes were written in the wrong hand, somebody purposefully trying to disguise their handwriting. The notes were also written on paper that seemed to have been ripped out of a notebook, and seemingly it was the same notebook each and every time. Now, police of course did take the notes to try and find fingerprints on them, but they were unsuccessful. But the police did also confirm that the writer was using their non-dominant hand as suspected. But other than that, they could learn nothing more from these notes. But then this case was about to take even more of a bizarre twist when in November 1985, 4 months after the attack on Dorothy, Bill opens the front door one morning to discover that his gun, the .22 caliber revolver, had been returned, placed on the porch in a plastic shopping bag. 3 more of their stolen items would be returned in that very same way over the coming months, and police would again of course take them off for testing to look for fingerprints, but they were always wiped clean. Years go past with no answers in this case, and the harassment just continues, but Bill and Dorothy remain in the house. I saw a lot of people online wondering why on earth they would stay here under such harassment, but we don't know their situation or why they did what they did. But they were elderly, in their late 50s, early 60s. They'd lived in this same home for almost their entire marriage, for decades. They likely didn't want to pack up their whole lives, or maybe they didn't have the energy or ability to do so. Maybe they didn't have the money to do it. Moving house is really expensive. Or maybe they were just stubborn and unwilling to give in. Lots of people are that way. 8 years after the initial assault, things really do seem to come to a head in 1993. It's Wednesday the 27th of October when Dorothy is attacked for a second time at age 66. This assault is so serious that she has to be admitted to local Affinity Medical Centre to be treated for a concussion and skull lacerations. This was a very violent attack, seemingly similar to the first. Now, the authorities at this time actually suspect that Bill was the man responsible for Dorothy's attack and for the persistent harassment over the last 8-9 years, but both of the couple deny this. They are insisting that it's somebody unknown to them, somebody outside the house. In the November of 1993, it seems like Bill has finally had enough when he devises a plan to catch the stalker once and for all. Why it took them so many years to get to that point, I have no idea. I'd say for me, it would probably only take a number of weeks before I posted somebody up outside my house as a spy, but maybe that's just me. Bill gets 6 members of his family involved. He gives them each walkie-talkies and asks them to stake out the house from different positions. But after hours of no activity, the family just call off the stakeout and walk away. They left. And then weirdly, later that very same night, the couple were apparently awakened by loud banging sounds on their front porch. Bill ran to the door, but the person was already gone by the time they got there, leaving behind yet another note, this time reading, "Get the message." It's really strange, isn't it, that this person is seemingly harassing them for years, but they never seem to ask for anything. Like, what is the motive here? What do they want from this? Do they just want to scare this couple out of their home? Or is it somebody who maybe wanted to buy the property? If so, why not just ask? I did try to do some research, but I couldn't find the actual address, so I can't tell you whether or not it was a particularly desirable property or desirable area. I really don't know. That's just one theory out of many. I mean, you see really similar theories in the cases of the Watcher. People think that that was somebody who just wanted to buy the house. The Circleville letters, they say that was somebody who just wanted to buy the house. Maybe they're trying to make the value of the house go down, so when they sell, they can swoop in and buy it. I wish I could tell you that people in the world weren't crazy enough to do that, but honestly they are. It happens all the time. I just don't know if the Wackers ever had somebody show any interest in their house. Oddly, after the last note telling them to get the message, there were no more reported incidents of the harassment. It just seemed to end with that. Strangely, actually, after the couple were offered security cameras for their home, the person never came back. As I said, this case was featured in Unsolved Mysteries back in the 90s, which did generate a lot of interest in it, but ultimately both Bill and Dorothy passed away without any answers. Bill died aged 79 on July 9th, 1999, and Dorothy aged 83 on July 22nd, 2010. Other than Dorothy's account of the attacker, there's never been any leads or suspects in this case. However, that's not to say there aren't any theories. As I said earlier in the episode, most of what we know about this case comes from forums where it has been discussed at length. It's been looked at from every possible angle. Most of the theories tend to sit in sort of one of two categories. Either there was Bill or Dorothy themselves responsible for the harassment, or there was a close friend or family member, maybe a neighbour. But there are also those out there who believe that Bill alone was responsible for the harassment of his wife, that she had no idea. But you would think that when it came to the first attack, where she got a very good look at the perpetrator's face, she would have recognised her own husband. But you never know, maybe he paid somebody. Why? Don't know. One of the main things that makes people think that Bill could be responsible is apparently the note reading, "Your lights are a laugh," light spelt with a Z. Some people believe the wording is more likely to be that of an elderly person with the use of laugh instead of funny, or like "your lights suck." It might even be an elderly person's attempt to sound younger with the use of the Z instead of the S. You've also got the fact that the couple didn't call the police when their home was allegedly invaded twice, and then the attacks just stopped when they were offered security cameras. That would make it pretty impossible to continue doing what they were doing, if it was them. It's also pretty suspicious that it took them 8 years to hold any sort of stakeout. However, there's no doubt that Dorothy definitely seemed to be much more of a target than Bill. She was physically attacked twice, so bad that she was sent to hospital on the second occasion. I'm not going to say it's impossible that somebody would do that to themselves, but it is unlikely. So again, I ask, what is the aim here? Is it just attention? Bill died in 1999, so I find myself wondering if the harassment of Dorothy continued after that point, but there's no record of anything past 1993 or 1994. If it was attention that they wanted, why did it seemingly go quiet after the Unsolved Mysteries segment that aired in May 1994? Surely you'd capitalise on that. Which makes me suspect that maybe it wasn't one of them, that they weren't responsible, that perhaps the true perpetrator was scared off by this being on TV, scared they were finally going to get caught. I'm aware there's still very sort of like stream of consciousness of me, but honestly none of these theories are solid enough to like devote a whole section to. It's just ideas. It's all speculation in this case. We have nothing solid. I find myself wondering if it maybe was a close family member or a friend who was responsible, perhaps even one who was involved in the stakeout that night. Perhaps somebody who persuaded the rest of the family to give up, it was too quiet, let's go home, and then they came back and continued with harassment. Again, I can't tell you motivation. Perhaps Bill and Dorothy had wronged them in some way. Perhaps they were mentally ill. Some people are just straight up not nice people. Maybe that was it. Or maybe it was a neighbour, which might explain why no neighbour ever came forward backing up their story, claiming they saw anything. You would think even if Bill and Dorothy never saw anyone, somebody else on the street might have seen people hanging around their house. This is one of those cases in which it seems that people mostly just moved on, bar some rogue forums on the internet. It is fascinating to speculate about this, but I highly doubt we're ever going to get any answers here, especially seeing as both Bill and Dorothy have passed away. Does anybody, any of my viewers, maybe live in Massillon who might be able to give us a bit more insight in the comments? Is anyone closely connected to people involved in this case? I'd be so intrigued to hear all of your thoughts and feelings in the comments. Do you think they were genuinely being harassed, or do you think they did it themselves for attention or for any other reason? There have been a lot of podcasts and threads over the years speculating on the idea of poltergeist and supernatural involvement here, but I don't really think I'm the best person to do a deep dive in that, being the skeptic that I am. A poltergeist also likely wouldn't be able to send Dorothy to hospital, but again, I don't really know how poltergeists are supposed to work, so maybe. The question is, who, if anyone, would want to terrorise an elderly couple, a couple in their 50s and 60s, for a decade, and then just simply stop, disappear without a trace? What would be the point? That is a question that I simply don't have the answers to, and it seems that neither does anybody else. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm aware this is very much one which is a bit flaky, there's not loads of information here, but it's a really interesting story nonetheless, and one that I wanted to share. So thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for tuning in if you listen to this on my podcast, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.